So, let's dive into an ancient and, frankly, pretty intense set of laws from the book of Leviticus. It's often called the Holiness Code, and its whole purpose was to build a very specific kind of society by drawing this sharp, uncrossable line between what was sacred and what was, everything else. Let's see what that actually looked like.
Okay, this one line right here. It's the key to understanding everything that follows. Seriously, it's the mission statement. The entire logic of this code is built on that one central idea, being set apart.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we're going to figure out what holy even means in this context. Then we'll look at what they considered crimes against God, the super strict rules for family life, and the brutal punishments that came with breaking them. And finally, we'll see how all of this was meant to create a people completely set apart from everyone else.
All right, let's start with that central command. When this text says be holy, what did that really mean to them back then? Because the definition is probably a lot more specific than you're thinking.
Here's the key. Holy here doesn't just mean being a good person. In this context, it means to be fundamentally different. It's a state of separation. You're dedicated for a specific divine purpose and totally removed from what's considered ordinary or common.
And yeah, this was not some friendly suggestion or an optional lifestyle. These laws were presented as a binding contract. Following them was the absolute foundation of the community's relationship with their God, who, the text says, is the one who ultimately makes you holy in the first place.
So, with that idea of separation in mind, let's see how it actually played out. The first set of laws are all about protecting religious purity, basically guarding against any kind of spiritual corruption or, divided loyalties.
And the code does not mince words. It specifically forbids things like sacrificing children to a deity named Molech, or trying to contact the dead through mediums and spiritists. These acts were seen as the ultimate betrayal, kind of like a form of spiritual adultery. You see this phrase a lot in the text, cut off from their people. And we need to understand what this meant. This was a punishment that in some ways was seen as even worse than death. It meant total removal from the community. A social and spiritual exile that cut you off from your family, your heritage, everything.
Now, this whole idea of separation didn't just stop at the temple door. It went right into the most private parts of life. The code laid out a really rigid structure for how the family was supposed to work, both socially and sexually.
And wow, the list of rules is extensive. The code gives this comprehensive list of forbidden relationships. It covers everything from incest with relatives by blood or marriage, to adultery, same-sex relations, and bestiality. The goal was clearly to build a very specific, pure family structure that looked nothing like the cultures around. And the consequences for crossing these lines? They were absolute. This quote about adultery makes it pretty clear. There was zero ambiguity. If you violated the sanctity of a marriage, the punishment was death, for both of you.
Which brings us to the punishments themselves. So why were they so incredibly harsh? Well, it ties into a concept the text refers to as blood guilt, which basically means the responsibility for what happens next falls squarely on the person who broke the law.
Just to give you a sense of how central this was, in this one section of text alone, there are more than 10 different crimes that were punishable by death. That just shows you how serious they were about enforcing this code.
And there wasn't just one type of punishment either. They ranged from community executions like stoning or burning to what was seen as divine payback, like dying without children. That reoccurring phrase, "their blood will be on their own head," was the legal justification. It meant the person who broke the rule was fully responsible for their own fate.
Okay, for our last section, let's pull all these threads together. All of these rules, these purity laws, and these really severe punishments, they were all pushing toward one single ultimate goal. This comparison right here really gets to the heart of it. The entire code is framed as a contrast to what the other nations were doing. Where their customs were said to defile the land, these laws were meant to guarantee holiness and forge a totally different social and spiritual identity.
And here's the ultimate why behind it all. According to the text, following this code was the price of admission for living in the Promised Land. The people who lived there before were supposedly driven out because of these same practices, and this code was the safeguard to keep the Israelites from suffering the same fate.
So when you boil it all down, the one big instruction that sums up the entire code is this:
Live a life that is defined by making distinctions, a distinction between clean and unclean, between holy and common, and ultimately between yourselves and everybody else.
And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. This code was written for a specific group at a specific time with the clear goal of creating separation. So how do these ancient ideas about purity and being set apart still echo in our modern world when we talk about morality, community, and justice?